Hello everybody, it's time for the Christmas special, at the end of which there will be a whole lot of really funny and cute photos from World War II Christmases. I figured that would be a lot more fun to give you all something to laugh and smile about than reading you sad and tragic stories and letters from Battle of the Bulge or from Stalingrad. And yes, there will be cute animals in Christmas as well, and yes, there will be a donkey among them. However, for this Christmas special, I want to start answering one of the bigger and more important questions about the Vikings and Christmas and Odin. Because Odin was really Santa Claus. Santa Claus really was Odin. Did you know that? And did Martin Bormann have anything to do with this? Is a growing evidence that the identity of Santa Claus was actually Franz von Müller, and he was hiding after World War II under an assumed name after his involvement of the Mist Beerhold Putsch. Did he have his real base in Greenland? No, he did not, because Eric von Daniken clearly has proven that Santa Claus's base, or Odin, was in the Antarctic, where he was working with German scientists such as Heisenberg, building a nuclear reactor, working on the Nazi bomb, under the auspices of Hans Kammler. And we know this because, in 1944, the nuclear reactor had a meltdown, growing 4 more legs on Odin's horse Sleipnir. Or was that SS Sleipnir? Or was it SS-1? Because you know Himmler was involved in this as well. After the accident, Gestapo Müller had 80 of the elves, or the SS helper elves, shot, and their graves have been found by Harry Cooper on a small island off the coast of Buenos Aires. Was this whole flying around in the middle of the night distributing gifts to innocent children really a reconnaissance on behalf of planning the invasion to Lebensraum in the east? Here's a picture documenting Santa Claus, or Odin, with propaganda minister Goebbels. You know there's something to this. Santa Claus was really Odin. Here's a picture of Odin collaborating with Hitler, planning the invasion of Norway. Was the whole scheme masterminded by Martin Bormann, funded and paid for by German taxpayers? And how exactly was the CIA involved? We do know from Winston Churchill's own diary, written late at night, rather drunkenly, little slurred speech, but he wrote it himself, that Santa Claus, Odin, and Hitler was picked up in a forest and flown to the planet of Aldebaran in 1945. Here, Odin lives under an assumed pseudonym name, Mary Jane, where he is planning for the return of the 4th Viking Christmas. Did you know all this? I bet you didn't. Now, what I want to do is I will actually tell you that Santa Claus was Odin, for those of you who don't know. So I'm going to tell you a story about Viking Christmas. We spend all year talking about death and destruction, so let's talk about something less violent, like the Vikings. Anyway, you know where I'm going with this. As pretty much all modern traditions today, they all come from somewhere. And the tradition of Christmas, or Yule, and in Denmark you'll still write and pronounce it J-U-L, Yule, or Y-U-L, as you say the Vikings have said it. And you can date a whole lot of the traditions of Christmas. Let's call it Christmas, because it hasn't always been called that. That sort of started in the 18th, 19th century. But the traditions that we are entertaining for a traditional Christmas feast and of the month of December pretty much all dates back to old Viking traditions. And I kind of want to share with you what some of those are, and a little bit of some of the stories goes back to the Viking sagas and how they manifested themselves into Viking tradition and lore, which is a little complicated to piece together exactly what the Vikings did because they didn't write anything down. Which is interesting because Odin was very famous for being a writer, and he wrote a lot. So we have what we have from the Vikings, from the Icelandic sagas, Norwegian, Swedish sagas. Things have been told. The time when Vikings became the horned invasion horde was something that was written for the much later British courts, almost 1,000 years later. And just a reminder, Vikings did not have horns on their helmets. And if you're underage, this is not mead, or it's alcohol-free mead. If you're over 18, mead is really good. And that's something the Vikings would drink and bring with them because it would keep on the ships and barrels where the water would spoil. Now, we're back to the Viking Christmas. Now, one of the traditions we have, they have been adopted and changed over the years and through several Christmas plays some 100 years ago. But traditionally, Odin was a bearded man. Now, Odin was an interesting character. He was one of the strongest Norse gods, and he oversaw Valhalla, and he the one that decided who went to Valhalla when you died. Now, Valhalla is this big place of feast where warriors go when they die. When they die worthy in battle, that is. That's why it's important for Vikings to always die heroically fighting, that they're amongst the bravest. So the Valkyries will pick them up and take them to Valhalla, that they will dine with Odin at his long table, where there'll be a Yule log burning at one end. That's why we have the Yule logs, which now also turned into pastries. A Yule log was traditionally oak because it would burn the longest. So you would burn that in the longhouse to keep warm, because believe me, traditional Scandinavian winters are really, really cold. So you really want to keep warm in those. But if you shut everything and you put a fire in the middle, they're actually quite warm. And yes, I have tried. They would carve runes in the log for good luck, and then that would burn over the traditional 12 days of Christmas as it was. But that would be burning in Valhalla. And Valhalla was a really interesting place because all the warriors, the heroic warriors, soldiers, and those Odin deemed fit to go to Valhalla when they died, would be there, and they would live there forever. And Valhalla was pretty much, life in Valhalla was, I see the attraction. It would be one long feast and party and drink, and they would fight for sport and fun because they couldn't die, and there would be beautiful women serving them beer, and they would be roasting the same pig forever and ever, because no matter what you sliced of that pig, it would grow up immediately. That is one of the reasons why in Scandinavia you eat wild boar, or now tame boar, pig, or Christmas roast for Christmas. That was part of the tradition. So that's what you ate in Valhalla, along with a lot of mead. And that's thus what life would continuously go day in, day out in Valhalla. But sometimes Odin, now you have to think, Valhalla was at the top of the tree of Yggdrasil, the tree of life, as you have now translated it. You always see the trees with the roots here and there. But there's times when Odin and the warriors at Valhalla would have, the other gods would have to go battle against the ice giants that would constantly try to infringe all Valhalla. And if you take that back to Norse tradition, which part of Scandinavian and Norse countries are up on the Arctic Circle, or sort of within it, and you had, every winter was a battle of survival. And the cold, the frost, the ice that would always infringe on Viking life. Certainly that was the ice giants that Odin was battling, and it exactly makes sense where that comes from. Every Viking would recognize this. Every Viking would recognize winter with some approaching trepidation, because now today you are a bunch of spoiled little brats who can go to Walmart or whatever store you want to go to and buy whatever you need, and you can go home and sit in your apartment and turn on the heat. Viking days, that's not an option. You had to spend your whole year planning to survive the winter by having food set aside, food that would not spoil, especially in the period before there was enough frost that you could kill an animal and have it sit out in the meat sit in the snow so it wouldn't spoil. But things back then was a lot harder. And that's why they celebrated. Winter feast was the midwinter feast of 12 days, where you celebrated you were coming to the middle of the winter, and from there on it was just downhill and things were warming up again. They would celebrate this for 12 days of feasting and drinking. Tell me the Vikings had good ideas. I'm not entirely sure how that turned into 24 days of feasting, drinking, and shopping. And now 9 months of shopping of the 9 months of Christmas, brought to you by Macy's and Walmart. Things have changed. What are you going to do? One of the other traditions we have was we had a mistletoe, you know, the one with the mistletoe. And some of you young kids out there are not familiar with traditions because no one bothered teaching you. You hang up a mistletoe, and that's traditionally the one under which you kiss. Which, not a bad idea. I just don't know how to get a mistletoe here or someone to kiss. Anyway. Now, Baldur was the son of Odin and Frigg. He was incredibly handsome and everybody loved him. He was loved throughout the kingdom. And one night he had a dream of his own death. It was frightened him so much when he told his mother she had Odin get on his horse and ride all the way to hell to make promises that his life would be spared. But that wasn't enough for her. She made everything on earth, every plant, everything, promise that it would, or they would, or whatever would, not do any harm to her son, except she forgot the little mistletoe. And Loki, being the horrible god that he is, used this to kill him with an arrow. After that, Odin's other son rode to hell to get hell to release Baldur's soul, because he was that loved. This was promised to him if they could make everybody, every living being in the kingdom, weep for Baldur. And they almost succeeded, except from this giant living in a cave that was actually Loki in disguise, who refused to do so, and thereby Baldur remained dead. But it was her tears that spawned the red and white Christmas colors. That would open up for Ragnarok and the end of times if he died. His mother cried such tears on red berries that they turned white. Now you have the red and the white that comes into play at every Christmas. Now also during Yule, as we prefer to call it, you had more ghostly sightings and more supernatural occurrences than any other time of the year. That was traditionally the time of the great ghost hunt, which was led by Odin, who was riding through the sky, led by his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, that he would ride into battle. When it was time for battle, he would ride his 8-legged steed. But over the midwinter's feast, Odin would ride the sky on a sleigh of thunder that was pulled by Sleipnir. Sleipnir's harness was engraved with runes. Incidentally, so was his teeth, which I hope no Viking actually took that one to heart and tried to engrave his horse's teeth with runes. But now you see, when you fast forward to warriors engraving runes on their favorite weapons, the runes all have meanings, and a lot of them are meanings of protection or worship or love or what have you. That's why you see a lot of the Germans in World War II had their tanks painted with runes. Because during the Third Reich, there was a whole resurgence of the Old Norse traditions. And especially, of course, within the SS, and Himmler was very interested in Norse mythology, which had also, to some degree, lived through the Germanic tribes. And that's why you see that, of course, you all know the SS runes and the single runes. But it wasn't just the SS as such. It was just meant as a token of protection. And I think everyone who's been a soldier, who's been in dangerous situations, well, you know, they'll clutch to something, mostly a rifle. But I know tankers who have who today that have painted little runes on their tanks for protection. And especially my favorite Norse god is the god of Tyr, which may explain tattoos on me that my future wife may or may not get to see, if I find one. Tyr was the god of justice and protection, and he would be the protector of women. And I always liked him. So you have the T, incidentally, although my name is Tino, My mom wanted to give me a name that no one could abbreviate, like call me Richard and everybody would call me Dick. And she gave me the name Tino because nobody would, how could you can screw that name up, right? So the first person in Denmark that was born named Tino. She had to get special permission. I'm in Los Angeles for less than half a day and people start calling me T. Apparently we can't be bothered with the other three letters. So anyway, we have the T rune, which is the upward pointed arrow, which is again symbolic of strength and justice. And the Vikings actually were quite just. We always think of them as these raving lunatics that would rape and pillage and go from village to village in England. And come on, English had it coming. You put all that gold and silver out by the coast. What the hell do you think is going to happen? However, within Viking law, within the Viking community themselves, for instance, if a woman was violated by somebody else, well, obviously by somebody else, well done, she would be allowed to exact the revenge upon the perpetrator herself, for instance. I'm not saying it was a perfect society, but I think that seems like a fair way of dealing with things. Even if a man couldn't perform his wifely, husbandly duties, she would be allowed to divorce him and find another. The women were very, very important in Viking society. And there's been more and more evidence that when you went Viking... See, the thing is, Viking is not something you are, it is something you did. You went Viking. Every year when the winters was over and the storms were down, they would get in the boats and they would go Viking, which means let's go somewhere else and steal somebody else's crap and kill them if they object. And maybe we'll take some slaves. So there's more and more evidence now that women went Viking as well with the men. We always thought there's only men doing this, but I guess if you found the one dude in the longboat that doesn't have a beard, might not be a dude at all. There's been Viking women bodies that's been found with battle scars and that has healed and more and so on. So again, we're back to the problem with Viking history is we just don't know because they didn't write it down. So we're looking at what evidence is found in the ground when it is found, if it's found. Also, in Scandinavia, we will decorate Christmas trees. That's what the Vikings would do. They would decorate and they would put little runes. They're traditional. There would be little runes hanging from the Christmas trees. There would be food and pieces of clothing and tributes to the gods. Because it was believed that the spirit of the trees would leave in the winter. But if you offered household offerings and food and drink, the spirits would return. As indeed they did with the warm weather, and the trees would grow again and flourish. Of course, the Vikings were very sensible and pragmatic people, so they did not actually put little candles on their trees inside their wooden buildings. And I guess that's probably against city ordinance here in California anyway. So with the Yule log burning, since fireplaces are now also illegal in California. California ruined Christmas. Never mind. Back to the Vikings. There's some indication, of course, the Vikings would sing and get drunk and have fun and play fight. And back to the singing, there's, I think, the tradition of caroling was tagged on to Christmas later. It's not a Viking tradition. Yes, they would sing. But Christmas caroling or vassailing was known as vassailing, remember that word, was that literally the peasants would go to their feudal lord's house and sing outside the gates until they gave them food and bread to go away. And you remember the song We Wish You a Merry Christmas? Where the lyrics are, we won't go away until you bring us some. That's kind of where that came from. I just don't see that as a Viking tradition, more so as something that tagged on 14th, 1500s, maybe a little bit before. I don't see Vikings running around in the winter singing at some other Vikings, even the head chieftain in the valley, at his house for him to give them something. Because I said, Vikings were pragmatic and they were planning for the winter thing, all of them. They were, again, a community. And of course, the warriors mattered more. and they would certainly have theirs. But I don't think they had to walk around and sing to get it. Another thing you will see, and you've also seen this in a lot of the World War II Germanic and the SS traditions of the winter solstice. You had the wheel, the sun wheel, that you would build a big wheel, you set it on fire, and you roll it down the hills. That's what the Vikings did, again, to herald the bringing of the sun. You would build this huge wheel and set it alight and roll it down the valleys, which you could do in Viking times because there's snow everywhere. Probably more frowned upon, especially in some of the more drier states here. Generally, unless you live in Oakland, you probably don't set wheels ablaze and roll them down the streets. So I'm not suggesting it, but that is where that came from. It is all about, you see probably, if you've seen old documentaries from Germany in the 30s, you see all these burning wheels on display, and that's where that came. That was an actual Viking tradition. Back to Odin and Santa Claus. Now, Santa Claus, you can't deny St. Nicholas, who gave to the poor, had an influence on Santa Claus, who's also giving to the poor. But so did Odin. He was an extremely generous god, and he had a big beard, unlike what I remember St. Nicholas did. At least Odin's was bigger and braided, which is really cool. Of course, also St. Nicholas, he couldn't fly through the sky with his chariot. Thank you, Von Däniken. Yes, if you've seen Ancient Aliens, definitely. I'm sure they did a bit on Odin being an alien flying through the sky on his chariot with his eight-legged horse. Blah, blah, blah. But Odin was an incredibly generous guy, and he was a very interesting person. If you go through history and you look at the original, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, depictions of Odin, he was a tall, gaunt old man with a beard and a walking stick that would walk through the worlds. Odin had a thing about changing into different shapes and characters, and he could take on any form he wanted. But his favorite was of the gaunt old man that would go through the world and listen and talk to people, talk to his warriors, them not knowing he was him. And I guess that's how he knew who was good and who was bad and who to be rewarded. Reward being getting into Valhalla, where you get everything you want. And that, I think, that is interesting. You also know, well, Odin knew he was the all-seeing eye, despite he only had one eye, having given up one. That's why early Odin statues had two eyes, because initially he did, but he gave one up to throw it in the well of wisdom that he would see where his dead brother was. That's why you see Odin as now the one-eyed god. He had his two ravens that he sent out to the 9 worlds and would bring him information back every day. Then when Christianity began coming into the Viking worlds and to Scandinavia, well, there was a trade-off that had to be made, because if you want everybody baptized and they all have their traditions and their beliefs that were pretty cool to them, well, you have to give and take a little bit. So Christmas, birth of Jesus, well, let's move that some months and make it fit with Norse mythology, and they get their Christian Christmas, and the Vikings get to have their midwinter's feast. And that's kind of how Christmas ended up where it did. A lot of the traditions came back from then, like the wreaths and the decorations and so on. Then they become more and more Christianized. They put the star on the tree all of a sudden instead of the runes. You also have some of the Roman pagan festivals of Saturnalia, I believe one of them was called, and which was from December 17th to the 24th. And you had the German festival Yule, as that had become the Great Hunt, which is the same time frame. Those are the ones that all became consolidated into Christmas, when the Christians came and said you can't have silly fun anymore. And that's where the tradition of gifts coming from. You would leave gifts and offerings under the tree back in or out in actual nature by the actual trees, by the Viking age. And now we put our Christmas gifts under the tree because Odin was an incredible charitable person. Now, Odin had magical elves and dwarves that would make gifts for him that he would gift to the other gods and to the people he deemed worthy. For instance, Thor's hammer was made by one of Odin's elves. Or is that Sturmabteilung Odin? That's its own, never mind. His sleigh was pulled by his horse Sleipnir. But that was pretty normal, and that's certainly not something that translates to Santa Claus at all, was it? Everyone was pulled the chariots or their sleighs by animals, like Thor's chariot was pulled by flying goats, and Frey's chariot was pulled by cats. So now we have the imagery of Odin having little elves and dwarves making gifts, and that directly translates into Santa Claus. Not to mention the fact that they look alike. And it wasn't until the 18th century that the imagery of Santa Claus became a little fattier and choppier and become the mall Santa giving gifts, because originally it was a tall, gaunt, older man. That was his reflection. That's how his drawings from the 18th century, you'll see, are depicted. For Christians, Christmas is a celebration of the coming of the Lord, of God, of Jesus. Back in the day of the Vikings, the Midwinter's Feast was a celebration of the North gods, especially of Odin. He was known as the Yule Father, a Julefar, which translates into Father Christmas. Odin was the original Father Christmas. See how the plot thickens here? The actual modern image of Santa Claus, away from that of Odin, really didn't start until early 1800s. In the 30s, 1930s, began depicting Santa Claus as this jolly fat old guy that rode around giving out gifts with his big beard. That was never the traditional depiction of Santa Claus from before. That has actually become a modernized version, but still of the old character that Odin enjoyed presenting himself as. And we know that Odin had an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, because it was found in cave carvings that are all thousands of years old up in Sweden. So we kind of had to piece it together, and it was for the Yule time be pulling a chariot or then a sleigh, because the Vikings knew sleighs. That's what you did in Scandinavia in the winter. You would pull a sleigh after a reindeer, because that's what you had. That's what you still have. You'll still see that every now places up in the far Sweden, Norway, in that time of the winter where reindeer will actually pull sleighs because it's the most efficient. So that's what Vikings knew, and that's what they did. Then we come to the stocking stuffers, with the stockings that are shaped like boots. What the children would do in the Viking Age, they would fill their boots with foods for Sleipnir, so that when Odin would visit in the night, there would be food and refreshments for his horse in their boots. And in exchange of that, he would leave them gifts. That's where the gift giving in the stockings come from. It is all to feed the 8-legged horse Sleipnir. And Odin was a man of foresight. He knew what was going to happen. And in his disguise, an old one-eyed man, in one of the Volksanga saga, Odin would offer weapons and arms to the king, Haulkaki, but he refused because he wouldn't take the gifts from an old man. Later he realized this was Odin, and later he would die in battle as a result of not have taken the gifts from Odin. So Odin would actually come to Earth and give gifts and weapons and things that were needed to the people on Earth. He was a good, benevolent god, and I guess people should have listened to him. I also think about another gift that Odin would give to the other gods. Like I said, well, Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, was a gift from Odin that was made by his magic elves. And there was also a magic spear that Odin had, Gingnir. Now, in Christian tradition later on, there's also a magic spear that I believe Himmler got his hands on, has possibly disappeared since the end of World War II. But you see how traditions or folklore or sagas keep repeating themselves in the same terms. Although I haven't seen a magic flying hammer of Thor, in the Bible. I haven't looked for one, sorry, but I will now. It is also interesting that in the writings of Odin that we have only by having passed down from sagas, since again the Vikings did not write down a whole lot, although there's a lot of rune stones that have been written. And don't even think I've forgotten about the many rune stones that's been found throughout America. That is currently somewhere in the basement of the Smithsonian, instead of on display. Let's just get this off the table. Columbus did not discover America, the Vikings did. And they were a lot further in here than we think and been told to believe. Midwest, you have runestones found. And if you talk to a Viking historian in Scandinavia, everybody knew the Vikings made their way to America. If you talk to a historian in America, I guess that doesn't fit the narrative, so not so much. Anyway, we were here first. I want my Viking holiday. Bite me. But in the sagas, Odin writes a lot about the heroic stoicism of fighting against odds, about wisdom, about gift giving. He talks a lot about giving gifts to people. Like I said, he was a generous god. That translates straight up to Santa Claus, who braves nature, weather from the North Pole in the winter to give gifts, fitting right in with Odin's writings and handed-down sagas. So, as you can see, throughout Christmas, there's a lot of the Viking traditions that has directly translated into what Yule is, what Christmas is, what North mythology and what the Vikings actually did, especially decorating the tree that we all do. And I remember when growing up, we always had, every one of my grandmother's house or my mom's house, our house, we all get real pine tree, have the right shape, and it'll be decorated beautifully, especially with like strips of polished lead strips that would probably be banned everywhere today, because apparently we could only survive those things some years ago. But we always have pictures of the Christmas trees from back then, and now in hindsight I don't understand why my grandmother didn't put runes on the Christmas tree back then, because she would have known that's where they were supposed to be. But I do remember having had Christmas balls with runes painted on them, and it's a little bit of a shame that runes and Norse mythology was temporarily hijacked by Himmler during the war, because people don't seem to understand that the Vikings were there a lot before. Sort of like the swastika existed a long time before Hitler. You have the Indian tribes here in America. You have the Indians in India, used it as a good luck symbol. And everything is symbolism. And you go to war today, I have a little hand hatchet I always carried with me, and I have a rune engraved in that for good luck. It's just, the little, not superstitious, but the little things we did and we have. But then again, you can also say that Ragnarok was starved off by Baldur's survival after Loki had killed him. Well, if you looked at the news lately, Baldur is probably dead now. So with that being said, remember what the Vikings always said and what Odin always preached. Yule, Christmas, is to spend time with your family and your loved ones and your friends. It is for feasting, eating, and drinking, and gift-giving. So I think you should do that wherever you are. And people, they don't say Merry Christmas, then you can say God Jul. Because if anybody takes offense of being wished a good Viking mid-year feast, yeah, well, bite me. Now, bringing you all to God Jul, I decided that I would not spend my Christmas special reading you sad and tragic letters from Stalingrad, the Battle of the Bulge, but I would show you some of the funnier pictures tying onto the one question I'll answer in this special, the about Germans, how did they celebrate Christmas during World War II? And yes, they did, very much so, especially at the front. So here are some of the photos, and it's all just fun and games. Wanted to bring you some fun stuff, some cute stuff for Christmas, make you all smile, because at the end of this year, we all need some to smile. So to all of you, go Yule. Wartime is traditionally a time of a very interesting sense of humor. And of course, cartoons that are also drawn by people at the front or soldiers. But humor has a big part of soldiering, like pretty ladies, even drawings. And I think it's because if you're a soldier, you endure a lot of hardship much better with a sarcastic sense of humor than you do with others. And we have become rather weak and scrawny. Of course, dogs during war, and Drake, this one's for you. Dogs are always cute, and the silly things we make our dogs do in civilian life, a lot of soldiers love their dogs at the front, and then they dress them up, and that is still funny or really, really cute. And no, the SS did not eat the kitten afterwards. I think I know him. See him in the park. And the squirrels that I used to like until they started eating my patio furniture. Fuckers. And this was World War I, and it was wounded, and it healed. And yes, that is a real commission. And the little kitten here, I'll send you the GIF if you want it. Now this dog here used to think its owner really loved him until he exited this aircraft with him. I have no idea how or what or why, and I hope this bear is stuffed. I just hope so. And yes, there's a donkey, and you know what's next. Yes, the t-shirt exists. One of you guys have made it, and I love it. But the Germans also had a battle sheep. That's important. And a war turtle. This is not the turtleback you thought it was it? And that one. And for those of you who complains about some of my overweight reenactors in my movies, this is a real photo. I will hear no more complaining. And I don't know. I'm just gonna laugh at that one. And that's a real thing. The dudes on the submarine actually shot a polar bear, and during the Blitz, and that one is cute. That is my favorite cute photo. Like that. I just always wanted to come home to a girl while I was wearing a uniform, and serious fraternization going on in that one. And this picture I really think you should take a look at, because if you notice, this is Allied and German soldiers working together in order to help the wounded, and I think that is the best of Christmas spirit and intention. And these were my favorite photos from World War I. They knew how to celebrate Christmas. Now, this photo, I just have to hold on. The poor Russian soldier, the one photo of a Russian soldier I could actually find with a Christmas tree. And we know the Russian soldiers had a hard time during World War II. This was their Christmas. All the best to them. Especially since this is our Christmas. Yes, the American way. Haha. And German flak crew drawing authentic. And here were Germans at the front celebrating Christmas. The Germans very definitely celebrated Christmas. And even if they did it World War I, they did it World War II. You get the Germans again and on the Eastern Front. And just like the GIs celebrated Christmas wherever they went. And the SS celebrated Christmas where they went. And here you have the Advent lighting. And this was from the SS Viking Division and their Christmas. And a bunch of GIs who think they can sing. And you gotta love these wartime photos even from a POW camp. They had a very sad little Christmas tree, but they had one. It's World War I again. This was from 1940 France, before the war, and French dispatch rider, early World War.
I will say we celebrate Christmas as soldiers, but sometimes the Christmas tree choices we have a little sad, but it's the thought that counts. And of course, we all love our 1940s ladies and our GIs in the middle of nowhere eating without a Christmas tree. But there's still the Navy and the Coast Guard celebrates Christmas, and here we back to the German Air Force celebrating Christmas. And in the bunkers in England under the Blitz and the desert for Christmas. I did what I could to try to find pictures of every branch, including this dude that looks like Chieftain. He really does, doesn't he? And this was from Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge for Christmas. I thought I tried what I could to find pictures of Christmas from every branch and every unit everywhere. And I did look for the, let's just face it, the women in the 40s. They were incredibly attractive. And this is Bastogne on the other side with this little Christmas tree as well. And I'm not sure if this is camouflage or they're shopping for Christmas trees, but... And all these ladies don't smile much. It's a very serious looking picture. Here's Hitler being ambushed by Odin, like I showed you before. And a little colored wartime photo from the front. That one I don't even know. Like here's Goebbels with Santa Claus, and here's one that looks a little bit more like Odin. I almost see something that looks like that one. Yeah, you explain that one to me. And we just turned into a little bit more silly because I think we need something to laugh at, like the dudes with umbrellas. Yeah, infantry duty. Thought I'd bring you something to laugh at, and you can laugh at this. This is a real photo, and I know exactly why he did it. Ask me in the Q&A if you want. But you do have a sense of humor fighting at the front, or I guess under it. If you guess what this is, you get a cookie. The toughest, coolest woman ever has to be this woman. Her village is burning around him. World War II is fighting around her. Everybody's dying. She's like, the hell with it. I'm just leaving, okay? And yeah, World War I, you did dumb things, but dumber things were seen to come, I guess. Water passage day, maybe? And when your lunch won't sit still, you gotta chase it, and I hate when that happens. So, they send Adolf a little Xmas Christmas, and he sends some back. Humor on both sides of shouldering is the same. That one, don't know. Don't see 8 legs. And that might be from a movie we did or will do next weekend. And that is a real alarm clock without the mustache. Where is it? That one should be a music video at least. I don't know. I still don't know. But it is funny. Really funny. Just like COVID World War II. Don't know. They had fun. A little bit. And that's got to be Eastern Front. Little symbolism going on here, and I have no idea where this thing came from. But wartime fun photos, considering there's some... That sucks. I've done that. Wartime... Somebody explain this one to me. It's a real photo. I don't know. But to see a little bit of humor on fronts where so many horrible things happened and so many people died is actually really nice. And that there's a little levity between the battles. I don't know why she keeps coming back. She just, I don't know, she pops up. This is the Madonna from Stalingrad. And this is still my #1 picture because it is so sad. But during the war, you did have one of the questions you asked me if the Germans celebrated Christmas. And this is from a German newsreel where the trains just drop off a Christmas trees to the guys coming up on the front. Christmas has always been a very big tradition, especially around soldiers, because it is traditionally a place where fighting lets up a little bit, and hey, sometimes you get pretty girls come visit you in the hospital. And remember, whenever there's a pretty nurse, whenever you're banged up, the pain always goes away. Your leg could be falling off, but yeah, no pain when the nurse is pretty. And Did you guys all know that we're switching to the pink and greens, or at least we're supposed to? The old World War II uniform, and I do like that. I like that. But here you got all the Germans being celebrated, and sometimes if Santa Claus did not visit, it was someone dressed up like Odin, or as 2 weekends ago, Krampus. But that's a whole different story. And I will now shut up and leave you with the imagery of Santa Clauses wandering around the German troops in their newsreels here. And I'll wish you all a happy Yule, and I will see you next week for something else.